Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever it is, wherever you are, however you are. I hope you're doing well. I was going to do a Thanksgiving stream and just kind of make sure to say be thankful, but I can say that without doing a specific Thanksgiving stream. Yes, tomorrow is Thanksgiving. If you celebrate that here in the United States, I know I have listeners all over the world. So, regardless, you should always be thankful for everything you got. I was on a podcast called Aiming Up by my friend Brent, and I want to make sure I give him a shout out. I don't know if the podcast that he recorded is going to come out. He said there were some issues on my end apparently with Riverside, so hopefully he gets that figured out. But if you are listening to this right now, please make sure you look up Brent's podcast called Aiming Up. It's on YouTube and all the audio podcatchers and all that stuff. So make sure you go check that out. Yeah, we may re-record my episode because once again, apparently there were some technical issues. He's going to get a hold of Riverside and kind of see how that goes. So today, I want to talk about what will Trump's Ukraine policy look like. We've heard so much about Ukraine, specifically from the Trump camp, saying that this never would have happened on his watch, and that he'll have this ended as president-elect. As we can kind of see right now, unfortunately, that the war is not over yet. Somebody let me know in the chat if you can hear the buzzing. I got a little bit of buzzing. I'm not sure if that's just coming from my headphones or what. But anyways, we've been hearing forever now that Trump will have the war ended, basically as president elect. Um, that is my hope. I sincerely hope that that is the situation, right? I'm not here to rain upon people's parades or anything like that, but I'm here to provide a little bit of an objective analysis from somebody who I have to admit I'm not a fan of Trump as a politician. I'm a big fan of Trump as a person. I think he's hilarious, but the people that he's chosen to staff his administration with, and kind of his own statements and what he did as president will kind of give us more of an objective look, at least an objective predictor to kind of look at what he will do going forward into 2025, 2026. And, we can kind of go from there. So I wanted to take a look at it from that angle because, once again, we have heard so much about him talking about this and about how all the mess was on Biden and Kamal's watch, which is largely true. And they have continued to make this a lot worse. But once again, I want to give an objective policy analysis on this. I have a lot of kind of stuff to cover here. So if you're looking for more of a laid back stream, this is probably not going to be the one for you. We're going to be diving into a lot of articles and a lot of information and watching some videos as well as statements and all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, let me do my shilling and also tell you one more time, please, 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 please enjoy Thanksgiving with the people that you love. If you're anywhere, please go to YouTube and subscribe and all that good stuff. I have a link below so you can donate to the channel. But more importantly, spend time tomorrow with people that you love. I see everybody going to bat saying how you should eat the turkey. Just eat the turkey. Ham is obviously the more superior animal food on Thanksgiving Day, and I will die on that hill. Although you should eat the turkey. So Tucker Fitness is going to have a Black Friday sale. As you can see, I'm wearing my favorite hoodie from them. They don't sell this hoodie anymore, but I just really, really like this hoodie. So make sure you go to Tucker Fitness through the link below to get a killer deal on Friday. And also buy your supplements through them, preferably through the link below, so you let them know that the In Liberty and Health podcast sent you. Go to foxsonscoffee.com, use code Kyle at checkout to let Steven know that I sent you, and Deemed Fit through the link below to let them know that the Matovic family sent you and wants you to look all good, jacked and tan. So I've rambled on for almost 4 minutes now, which is a lot longer than I normally carry on an introduction. But without further ado, guys, let's get into it. All right, and welcome back, everybody. Zach, good to see you. Hopefully, you're still hanging around, man. I hope you enjoy tomorrow with your family. Eddie Grimm, same with you. Hope you enjoy time with your family, people you love, people you give a shit about, and all that good stuff. So, like I said, I was going to do just kind of a more chill stream, but more and more stuff was kind of coming to light, and I just kind of wanted to get the show out there. And I've kind of talked about this quite a bit on the show that I don't think Trump's going to end the war in Ukraine. I think it sounded good as a campaign promise, But I think me and Carl talked about this a little bit last week, where we believe it's going to be more of like a frozen conflict. They're going to continue to send aid, but you're just not going to hear about this as much. It's going to kind of become a quagmire for Russia, and they're going to continue doing what really the goal of NATO and the pivot to Asia is to slowly bleed down Russia, because they view them as a threat to their global dominance and the U.S. global hegemony. The U.S. obviously seeks to do this with Iran as well through Israel, although I think they take Israel a little bit more seriously, as in like there's a little bit more fervor around Israel, and there's no dissent on Israel between both parties, other than maybe some offhand Democrats. And then obviously both parties are in unanimous, decision about Taiwan as well, where they would like to see Taiwan declare its independence, and basically the U.S. Um, the U.S. would back Taiwan in their declaration of independence, and the U.S. would arm them to the teeth to slowly bleed down China. Although that situation is completely different than all of these, as is, I mean, all these situations are incredibly different, but I think the goal of the U.S. empire is generally the same in that respect. So, once again, the war in Ukraine, there is so much nuance here, and I am not the expert on this. If you want a deep dive on this, Scott Horton is the man right now, because he just put out his book Provoked. How the West provoked the war in how the West provoked Russia and caused the catastrophe in Ukraine. It's called something like that. If you look up Provoked on Amazon, I think it was like number one in one of those categories. It was in like Russian history or something like that, which is a little strange. I mean, I guess it kind of goes into Russian history, but I know my man there, Scott, had landed a number one spot somewhere there in Amazon. So if you want a very, very deep dive on the history of this conflict in particular, referring to the war in Ukraine, pick that book up, support Scott, support the Libertarian Institute, because those guys are dear friends of mine. I love all those guys, including Scott, and then obviously, Connor Freeman, Pat McFarlane, Kyle Anzalone, Keith Knight, all people who've been on the show a bunch. Tommy Salmons, how could I forget him? So all those guys over there are just great people. So make sure you go pick up his book to help all those guys out over there. So the war in Ukraine, I'll kind of give a brief breakdown of this. Back in the 90s, the US had basically told them, hey, we will kind of loosely defend you or help you out if you get rid of your nuclear weapons. Now, this is very, very just wide, 50,000 foot view. There's so much more into this that I'm not entirely informed on, but this is loosely kind of what happened back in the 90s. They denuclearized, and basically the US kind of gave them a little bit of guarantees. Okay, so then there was a lot of stuff that happened obviously between the 90s up until 2014. 2014 happens. John McCain and a whole bunch of other people from our State Department, the CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, all went over to Ukraine and were handing out flyers and giving speeches. And the duly elected government there was overthrown by the US, a US supported government, essentially, which people are going to say, oh, well, or the people who dissent from this view would basically say that, like, oh, this was a natural color coded revolution, where basically, like, the people did decide to rise up and overthrow their government. Okay, but the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA, John McCain, and a bunch of other politicians were there at the time at the behest of Joe Biden and Obama to overthrow this duly elected government. Okay, fast forward to Zelensky getting elected, which I think was in 2018. And I may have that date incorrect. But Zelensky becomes president, and Trump had actually been the first president ever to send lethal aid into Ukraine. We had sent them money before, but we had never sent them aid. So the U.S. had sent them lethal Javelin anti-tank missiles, and we will cover this further on in the show. There's a whole lot that I got to go over, so I'm going to keep this part as brief as possible. And obviously that ramped up tensions quite a bit. Trump had also thrown out Russian diplomats, and I'm sure there was more nuance and more stuff that happened during the Obama and Biden administration from 2008 to 2016, but that history just isn't currently what I'm focused on right now. We're kind of trying to get up to today. So Trump sends in lethal aid, and then obviously Biden becomes president. And then in February 2022 is when Russia decided we're going to invade Ukraine. And this was because the Ukrainians were actually shelling in the Donbass region, which had largely voted to be part of Russia. They didn't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. Those people were overwhelmingly ethnically Russian. They spoke Russian, and they voted to leave to become part of Russia. So Putin decides to invade in 2022, and then now this war's been going on ever since. I covered if you go back through the archive of this show, you're going to find shows with Kyle Anzalone, Connor Freeman, Dave DeCamp, where we kind of talk about this stuff quite a bit. And once again, a lot of that history just isn't in my mind currently. So you could refer back to those shows. We could, to kind of go into the history if you so choose. Um, obviously there's a battle in Bakhmut, which is considered the meat grinder, where the average life expectancy of a Ukrainian soldier was like 4 hours. They had their long-awaited spring offensive that didn't really go as planned last year, and we've sent them like close to $200 billion in aid. And currently, Biden right now is looking to send about another $24 billion in aid, as well as authorizing long-range missiles to shoot into Russia, literally at the behest of the U.S. government. This is a lot of information, and I'm missing so much in this analysis just up to this point right here. But I wanted to kind of lay all this groundwork down to kind of talk about where we're at today. So once again, Kamala Harris lost the president, or lost her re-election bid, however you want to look at it, and she was pretty much running on the status quo. Trump is running in repudiation of the status quo, essentially, because this isn't his war. And this is kind of what Republicans do, not just Republicans, but I mean, like anytime there's kind of dissent. I mean, Democrats haven't really did this when Trump was president. You didn't really hear them say, oh, well, these Abraham Accords actually aren't peace agreements. And, the genocide Yemen's still going on. There were escalations to Somalia, Afghanistan, Yemen, and all these other theaters. There were escalations there, and Trump did pull back some of the troops that he sent in, but you didn't hear the Democrats talking about that because, once again, the Democratic elite is not anti-war. There are some parts of the more radical left, these kids on college campuses, that just don't like Israel, and because they look at them as the oppressors oppressing Palestine. Whereas actually back in the day, it used to be that Democrats actually kind of looked at Israel as the oppressed in that region because, obviously after World War II, they decided to form the state of Israel. So there's not really an anti-war leftist base, right? There are leftists who are anti-war who I've had on the show: Misty Winston, Nick from RBN, Craig Pastajardula, Sabby Sabs, a whole ton of people, the guys from the Revolutionary Blackout Network. There's tons of anti-war leftists, but those aren't necessarily the ones with any kind of influence, unfortunately. And there are a lot of anti-war right-wingers as well. Obviously like Ron Paul, the guys, Dave Smith, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul. Even though Rand, he kills me, man. I love Rand Paul, but unfortunately, he did vote to send more aid to Israel, if I remember correctly. Either that, or he didn't vote against the arms embargo on Israel that kind of was up for a vote recently. So, anyways, my prediction on Trump ending the war in Ukraine is nada. It's not going to happen. So, who did he put into his cabinet that would be essentially tasked with doing this? His two picks for Secretary of Defense and National Security Advisor, I apologize, and Secretary of State are Representative Mike Walz and Senator Marco Rubio, the senator who never saw an intervention that he didn't like. So I'm going to pull up antiwar.com right here, and we're going to cover who Mike Walz is, who is the National Security Advisor, and who has said some pretty abysmal things about Ukraine. So let me make sure this all looks good on StreamYard here. Apologies. I will zoom in here. Trump picks Representative Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. Waltz has suggested that he would advise Trump to escalate Ukraine to pressure Russia to come to the table. Published by a dear friend of the show, Dave DeCamp, November 11th, 2024. President-elect Donald Trump has asked Mike Waltz, a hawkish House Republican from Florida, to be his national security advisor in the incoming administration, multiple media outlets reported on Monday night. Waltz was a staunch supporter of the Ukraine proxy war early on and was one of the few members of Congress to suggest the U.S. send military advisors into the country. He was also critical of President Biden for supposedly not being aggressive enough, which, I mean, once again, if Trump's entire campaign was about ending the war in Ukraine, then I try to grade these things on a scale of what Trump states he wants. I think Trump is largely saying, once again, I think that this is just counter to the Democrats. He's trying to get votes, and a lot of people are reasonably so fed up with all the aid sent to Ukraine. So that being said, we're kind of looking for somebody, at least in the Trump administration, who is going to have a policy of being against the war in Ukraine. As you can see, Waltz is not. Conrad, if I may recommend someone to interview, I'd recommend Ray McGovern. He knows a lot about the current events in Russia and Ukraine. If I'm not mistaken, he's more to the left, I believe. Yeah, I would love to have Ray McGovern on, as he always says, Poutine. But yeah, I would have him on. But for this show, I would definitely interview him, and maybe I'll interview Scott sometime here soon to kind of cover this. But I wanted to lay out more my prediction of how this is going to go. Because once again, this is what's coming up. And I should have stated this a little bit earlier in the show, but you can all, or I reserve the right to be wrong. I've been wrong about a lot. I will continue to be wrong about a lot. And it's fully possible that my prediction here turns out to be wrong as well. So, continuing on. In 2023, Waltz began to express skepticism of the war, saying U.S. involvement in the conflict was not sustainable. However, in an interview with NPR last week, and once again, this was dated November 11th, this was on November 4th, the day before Trump got elected, Waltz suggested that he would advise the president to end the war in Ukraine by escalating. When explaining how he thinks Trump could bring both sides to the table, Waltz said the U.S. could ramp up sanctions enforcement on Russia and support Ukraine using NATO-provided weapons for long-range strikes inside Russia, something President Vladimir Putin, has made clear would risk a nuclear war, which, as I'm sure everybody is aware of, Biden had greenlit last week. First and foremost, you would enforce, and this is a quote, first and foremost, you would enforce the actual energy sanctions on Russia. Russia is essentially a gas station with nukes. Putin is selling more oil and gas now than he did pre-war through China and Russia. And you couple that with unleashing our energy, lifting our LNG ban, and his economy and his war machine will drop very quickly. So I think that will get Putin to the table. We have leverage, like taking the handcuffs off the long range weapons we provided Ukraine as well. And then, of course, I think we have plenty of leverage with Zelensky to get them to the table. And you know what? To his credit, he's absolutely right that we do have a lot of leverage to get Zelensky to the table, because if you just pull all the damn aid you gave him, he'll be forced to decide how he wants to continue to conduct this war. Maybe he would be a little bit less hawkish and wouldn't be launching these strikes into Russia because he realized, okay, I don't have the US to depend on. Continuing on. Discussing Iran, Waltz said that the U.S. must go back to the maximum pressure, referring to the previous Trump administration's Iran policies, which involve withdrawing from the 2015 nuclear deal, imposing crippling economic sanctions, and assassinating Iranian Quds Force commander General Qasem Soleimani. Waltz also hyped up claims about Iran plotting to kill Trump, which Iranian officials have strongly denied. And on top of that, I believe the FBI even came out and said, yeah, that's bullshit. Waltz is a staunch supporter of Israel and has repeated Trump's call to allow Israel to, quote unquote, finish the job in Gaza. Quote, the next administration should, as Mr. Trump argued, let Israel finish the job and get it over with fast against Hamas. They should put a credible military option on the table to make clear to the Iranians that America would stop them building nuclear weapons, he wrote in a piece for The Economist. And just to cover this, I would like to believe my audience knows this, but just in case they don't, or you're new here, Iran does not have nuclear weapons. All the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has went in and verified this. Actually, the Iran nuclear deal had actually helped kind of keep Iran, I don't want to say in check, but had basically provided more transparency into the fact that Iran does not have nukes. Continuing on. Waltz argued in The Economist essay that the U.S. is too bogged down in the Middle East and Ukraine and should be more focused on China. He is known as one of the biggest China hawks in Congress, declaring back in 2021 that the U.S. was in a Cold War with China. He frequently calls for the U.S. to send more weapons to Taiwan, saying last year the U.S. should arm the island to the teeth. The Pentagon has declared China the most comprehensive and serious challenge to the U.S. national security strategy, and the U.S. military is openly preparing for future direct conflict with Beijing despite the risk of nuclear war. So that is Mike Waltz on a brief look there. As you can see, once again, when we're grading on this Trump curve, not very good. So next, I'm going to go to another article from antiwar.com, and we're going to discuss his pick, Marco Rubio. But before, okay, real quick, Conrail, I heard it said that the talks really needed between the U.S. and Russia. That's where the center of the conflict lies. Yeah, I don't know. Zelensky seems pretty determined in beating back Russia, but once again, I don't know how much that is. He feels emboldened because the U.S. is footing the bill. So let me run an ad real quick, and then we'll get right back into it. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break from the show to tell you about the show's sponsor. We are now brought to you by Fox and Sons coffees. You can see right here, I got the Den Blend Dark. Really enjoy that. I've been drinking a lot of their Brazil honey prep right here. As you can hear, there's not a lot of beans left in it because I've been drinking it quite a bit. Just tell you a little bit about Fox and Sons, why I support them and why you should too, is that Steven had started the company up in Michigan to help teach his son about entrepreneurship. I'm all about that, and I do firmly believe that in order to spread liberty in our lifetimes, we have to support those who support similar values as us. And Steven does support all the same libertarian values that I bring and talk about on the show a lot. So go to foxandsons.com, use code Kyle at checkout to get 15% off of orders $25 or more, and there's always free shipping whenever you place an order that is more than $37.99. All right. Anyways, I didn't want to run that too long. Let me move over to this, and we'll talk about Marco Rubio, who everybody should be familiar with. And oh, look at that, they got provoked right there. So yeah, make sure you go pick that up if you want an education on this conflict in particular. Once again, this show today is just about my prediction on how Trump's Ukraine policy will look like. So this is once again by our dear friend Dave DeCamp, November 13th, 2024. Trump officially nominates Ultra Hawk Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. So once again, we are grading on the Trump curve of what they're going to do when elected. And for anybody who knows Marco Rubio, he is a super ridiculous hawk on everything everywhere, specifically China and South America. He is very, very hawkish on China, where I shared a video and Caitlin Johnson had retweeted it, made the rounds quite a bit, and he was calling for blowing up Chinese airship carriers in the Taiwan Strait, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So President-elect Donald Trump confirmed on Wednesday that he was nominating Marco Rubio, the extremely hawkish senator from Florida, to be Secretary of State in the incoming administration. And as I've said before, I do think Marco Rubio is worse for the job than Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken is obviously terrible, but Marco Rubio is just so dumb and just a psychopath when it comes to everything everywhere. So Trump's statement came 2 days after the New York Times reported Rubio was expected to get the job. Politico reported that Rubio's nomination and the appointment of Rep. Mike Waltz as Trump's national security advisor relieved Ukraine supporters in the U.S. who were worried the incoming administration would end the proxy war. Rubio's been in the Senate since 2010, has been about as hawkish as possible. In 2015, he's the preferred Republican presidential candidate of the neoconservatives as he supported reckless escalations overseas, such as the enforcement of a no-fly zone over Syria, which risked war with Russia. So as you could see, once again, Russia hawk. And Trump in his first administration was a Russia hawk as well. So we're going to cover that as well. During the previous Trump administration, Rubio was very influential in the policies in Latin America, including the failed U.S.-backed coup against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in 2019. Just to put a quick pause on that right there. If you want to learn more about this, please refer to the show that I did with Anya Parampil a couple months ago, where we talked all about Venezuela, because obviously the election was around at that time, and she was generous enough to give me her time and come on the show. That year, Rubio tweeted a picture showing former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi as he was being brutally killed, suggesting Maduro could face a similar fate, which is just absolutely psychopathic. More recently, Rubio has been an outspoken supporter of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza and has called for the U.S. to take a harder line on Iran. After Iran's most recent missile attack on Israel, which came in response to a string of Israeli escalations, Rubio said, "I urge the reimposition of maximum pressure campaign against Iran and fully support Israel's right to respond disproportionately to stop this threat. The United States will continue to stand with Israel." Last year, Rubio introduced a bill in Congress to prevent any future president from leaving NATO, which President Biden signed into law. Rubio's also built a reputation being one of the most hardline China hawks in Congress. In 2020, China placed sanctions on Rubio in response to a series of U.S. sanctions against officials in Hong Kong. The sanctions may bar Rubio from entering China and could complicate his role as the U.S.'s top diplomat. In 2023, China appointed a defense minister who was under U.S. sanctions, and the U.S. refused to lift them. So one more time, I mean, we're talking about a dude that's just totally off his rocker when it comes to um, foreign policy everywhere, really. So I want to go back to Mike Waltz, and this was a more recent interview that I know made the rounds. A lot of my friends in more of the left wing sphere and some people in the right wing anti war sphere kind of covered this. But let me make sure I'm in this tab. Okay, Trump's national security pick. I'm on the same page as Jake Sullivan about our adversaries. Mike, and this is from Mike Waltz once again, national security pick. We are hand in glove. We are one team with the United States in this transition. Right, Rep Mike Waltz said. Mike Waltz said Sunday that he has met with President Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, and the two administrations are working collaboratively on national security issues during the transition. Jake Sullivan and I have had discussions. We've met. Waltz said in an interview with Gillian Turner on Fox News Sunday. For our adversaries out there that think this is a time of opportunity, that they can play one administration off the other, they're wrong. He added, we are hand in glove. We are one team with the United States in this transition. And just like the Biden foreign policy has been such a disaster. I mean, all the wars everywhere, continuing to send nuclear submarines over to North Korea, which Trump, much to his credit, kind of cooled off, or well, nuclear submarines to South Korea. Trump, to his credit, did go over there and help cool off tensions in North Korea. I mean, he crossed the DMZ and shook hands with Kim Jong Un, which, once again, no other leader in recent memory has done anything like that. So, I mean, that's a big deal. What's up, B? Good to see you, man. I missed my Common Crown practice yesterday. So, B, I hope you have a fantastic time tomorrow, Thanksgiving, and all that stuff. And I did miss jamming yesterday. I was a little bummed when Matt said, let's call it off. But regardless, everybody wants to spend time with their family, and I have no problems with that. So, anyways, Walt, just the handling of everything under the Biden administration has just been awful. I've said time and time again that really the Biden administration's objective here is escalation at all times, anywhere, for any reason. And there's no talks, no diplomacy or anything like that. I mean, I think Anthony Blinken met with Putin once since the whole war broke out, and was over like some kind of prisoner swap, or his counterpart. I know there was only one meeting and it wasn't very diplomatic. So, President-elect Trump tapped Waltz, a Florida congressman and the first Green Beret to serve in Congress, to be his national security advisor in the upcoming administration. This is Waltz's first television appearance since being picked, though Waltz is currently a member of Congress with the most appearances on Fox News. Waltz also addressed some of the recent national security news, including the escalation in Ukraine. He compared the Biden administration's decision to let Ukraine use anti-personnel landmines as World War I trench warfare. The president-elect has been very concerned about the escalation, where it's all going. When asked about Trump's reaction to the most recent developments, he said, if North Korea has made this move, which I'm referring to and I don't know the exact number because the number has changed depending on who you ask. They said some say it's 5,000, some say it's 10,000, some people said it's 100,000. Nobody knows. If North Korea has made this move, we have made a move. Russia has now responded. Iran is involved. South Korea is thinking about getting involved. Our allies have now extended the range of their missiles as well. We need to bring this to a responsible end. We need to restore deterrence and peace and get ahead of this escalation later rather than responding to it. Waltz was also asked about the conflict in Gaza and how the Trump administration broadly sees the conflict in the Middle East coming to an end. Waltz praised Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for operations against Hamas and Hezbollah, including a recent pager and walkie-talkie operation against Hezbollah. He noted that Hamas has been devastated and Iran is incredibly exposed at this point. Quote, I think now is a moment to craft some type of arrangement that doesn't just put a pause on for future October 7th, truly bring stability to the Middle East and set the stage for what we just saw a few years with the Abraham Accords. Walt said referencing the treaties Israel struck during Trump's presidency with Morocco and some of its other semi-close neighbors. And in case the people who are listening out there aren't aware of this, the Abraham Accords were basically Trump paying off dictators in Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and countries surrounding the Middle East to basically turn their heads away from the Palestinians and as people say, throw them under the bus. It was just basically like a trade deal, and with countries that weren't at war. So, I mean, it wasn't like there was any kind of issue there in the first place. They weren't peace deals. They were just, once again, throwing the Palestinians under the bus and making all these countries kind of turn their head and giving them a whole bunch of money and weapons to just say, okay, yeah, you guys just play nice and continue to have your trade and don't worry about the Palestinian situation, which I do believe ultimately led to October 7th. We had peace deals being signed in the White House lawn just 4 years ago. Look at where we are today. I'm confident President Trump and his leadership and the team he is putting around him will get us back to that point in pretty short order. Unfortunately, I don't think so. I wish so, but I don't think so. And yes, we will get it next week. I can't wait. So that's that. We could skip over. Well, you know what? Yeah, we'll play this video from a Trump speech, and I'll give a little bit of commentary on this. Pull this up. This was Trump speaking at a campaign event in North Carolina. Says Ukraine is dead and lashes out at nasty Zelensky.
Look at the war in Ukraine, and I think it's something we have to have a quick discussion about because the president of Ukraine is in our country, and he's making little nasty aspersions toward your favorite president, me. And he's no angel. It's all such a horror. Biden and Harris caused this situation by the stupidity of what they said, by every move they make.
And Trump is largely correct in this point, to be fair, that the Biden administration has really done nothing to attempt to cool things off, where I think a responsible administration would be trying to cool things off or trying to get people to the negotiating table. I don't think Trump is in that mood. I don't think that he can or really wants to do that. So, yeah, I would hope, but yeah. I'll let the rest of the video play and we'll keep going.
But they caused the situation and now they're locked in. They're locked in. I watched this poor guy yesterday at the United Nations. He didn't know what he was saying. They just don't know what to do. They're locked into a situation. It's sad. They just don't know what to do because Ukraine is gone. It's not Ukraine.
Now, something to add on here as well is that it's really hard to get like a total death toll and human costs of the war in Ukraine. I know I've heard some estimates of like 200,000. I just don't know exactly off the top of my head. And I think I've asked Kyle Anzalone, Connor Freeman, or Dave DeCamp this question at one point. So once again, you can go back through all the older shows and check that out and kind of figure, kind of see what's fact from fiction there.
Anymore. You can never replace those cities and towns, and you can never replace the dead people, so many dead people.
And this is where Trump was really his strongest, was when he's talking about how he just wants the war to end and, he just wants to stop the dying. It's beautiful. But then he often fumbles the ball. So we'll share this tab. And this was more recently, that campaign event that I shared was 2 months ago. This was about 2 months ago as well. This is when Trump met with Zelensky, and we'll watch this and go on to the actual record of Trump when he was president and how he treated Russia and Ukraine.
Okay. Yes. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have the president with us, and he's been through a lot. He's been through a tremendous amount, like probably nobody else, almost nobody else in history, if you really get right down to it. And we're going to have a discussion and see what we can come up with. But a great honor to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thanks so much for this meeting. 5 years plus.
Yeah.
So we had meeting again here in New York in September, and now there are a lot of challenges in Ukraine, United States, and of course I want to discuss with you. I think where we are together, I think we have common view that the war in Ukraine has to be stopped and Putin can't win, and Ukrainians have to prevail. And I want to discuss with you the details of our plan of victory.
So, as you could see, once again, Zelensky does not want this war to end with Putin getting any more territory. Trump is kind of standing there, listening to him, and I think he does kind of seem like he wants to push back on him, and he does a little bit. But once again, this is a very, very sensitive kind of deal where, he kind of has to walk that line where he wants to maintain a good relationship with Zelensky. But then, at least if we are to believe what he says, then he also wants to end the war, which would mean more than likely Ukraine giving up some territory.
My honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a question?
So that's that. You could watch the rest of this video where they kind of discuss some stuff, but once again, not insanely important for this. So I want to go to hear from the Brookings Institute, which I know people will probably have issues with this, but this is dated December 31st, 2019. But on the record, the U.S. administration's actions on Russia. So this is kind of how Trump treated Russia when he was in there. Zelensky sounds like the voice of a villain. Conrail, sounds like the voice of a villain in a Call of Duty video game. That is hilarious. So I wanted to roll through this because they go date by date by date. This was very, very interesting, and I had never seen this before. So this is from 2017 to 2019. I'm sure there was some stuff outside of this that just isn't included here. But once again, this is actually Trump's record on Russia and Ukraine. So the Trump administration's policy actions often seemed at odds with the president's rhetoric. To set the record on policy actions rather than rhetoric, Alina Polyakova and Filipos Letses tracked the administration's concrete actions on Russia from 2017 to 2019. So instead of going down from 2019 back up, I want to start from the bottom. And there's actually quite a bit here. I didn't know there was really that much here. So starting in 2017, March 15th, indictments in response to the 2014 Yahoo hack. 3 Russian individuals were charged for the 2014 Yahoo hack, including 2 officers in the Russian Federal Security Service. May 24th to 25th, the meeting in NATO in Brussels, Belgium, the G7 in Sicily, Italy, G20 in Hamburg, Germany, which is July 7th through 8th, and the G7 was May 26th to the 27th. August 2nd, legislation, President Trump signs sanctions bill into law, or Russia, President Trump signs Russia sanctions bill into law. President Trump signed into law the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, enacting new sanctions on Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And if you are familiar with, any kind of anti-interventionist perspective, we do believe that sanctions are an act of war. You are punishing a country. And that was August 2nd of 2017, September 13th, ban government use of Kaspersky Lab software. The U.S. administration banned the use of Kaspersky Lab software on government computers due to Kaspersky's ties to Russian intelligence services. October 27th, released the guidance on the sanctions bill. The Department of State issued a public guidance implementation of Section 231 of the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act of 2017. The guidance specified 39 entities that the Department of State determined are part of or are operating on behalf of Russian defense or intelligence sectors. November 10th through 11th, APEC Economic Leaders Summit in Da Nang, Vietnam. December 18th, release a national security strategy. The White House releases national security strategy identifying Russia and China as adversarial to the United States. December 19th, 2017, in response to the INF treaty violation, export restrictions, the Department of Commerce announced new licensing and export restrictions on Russian companies Novator and Titan Barakati over production of a cruise missile prohibited by the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. More sanctions in December 20th. The Global Magnitsky Act, 52 people and entities from Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and elsewhere were sanctioned for alleged human rights violations and corruption, which to me is always the funniest thing. Oh man. Just the fact that the U.S. would really have the nerve to sanction anybody else for human rights violations when you look at kind of what we did over the last 20 years in the Middle East. And we want to complain about other people's human rights violations. Okay. Anyways, Conroe, thank you. Yeah, go check that out and report back. 2017, we're about wrapped up here, but this was actually the first time that the U.S. had ever armed Ukraine. December 22nd, the U.S. administration approved the plan to provide Ukraine with enhanced defensive capabilities to help it fight off Russia-backed separatists. So now we are going to, wow, there's a lot here. 2018. I'll read through these pretty quickly because we'll be here for quite a little bit. Updated the National Defense Strategy. The Department of Defense released the National Defense Strategy. And once again, they identified Russia and China as the top adversaries. January 26th, more sanctions on Russia. 21 individuals and 9 entities were sanctioned in connection with the conflict in Ukraine and Russia's occupation of Crimea. January 29th, release of the Russian oligarch list. The Department of Treasury released a list of the most significant senior foreign political figures and oligarchs in the Russian Federation and could potentially be at risk of sanctions. Military action in response to the attack on U.S.-held base in Deir ez-Zor, Syria. U.S. troops killed hundreds of Syrian forces backed by Russian mercenaries as well as Russian private military contractors. The American bombing was launched in response to a surprise attack on U.S.-held base in the oil-rich Deir ez-Zor region in Syria. And there was a statement on February 13th proposing sanctions on the Latvian bank involved in illicit Russian-related activity. Another statement, indictments in response to election meddling and cyber attacks, which is part of Russiagate. 3 Russian entities and 13 individuals were indicted, conducting information operations to influence the 2016 U.S. elections. As far as I know, on a lot of these indictments for Russian individuals interfering with the election, there were like bot farms and stuff like that through Facebook that were doing ads and stuff like that. Poisoning Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, England. A statement in response to Russian and Syrian regime attacks on eastern Ghouta, Syria. The U.S. administration condemned the military offensive that the Assad regime, backed by Russia and Iran, had been conducting in Syria's eastern Ghouta region. More statements, more sanctions. So there were a few statements on March 14th and 15th. An alert, sanctions on March 15th as well. 5 Russian entities and 19 individuals were sanctioned for conducting a series of cyber attacks. Expulsions. So this is when I was mentioning how they threw out diplomats, Russian intelligence officers in New York. 12 Russian intelligence officers from the Russian mission to the United States in New York were expelled for actions deemed to be abuse of their privilege of residence. More expulsions on March 26th. 48 Russian intelligence officers from the Russian embassy in Washington were expelled, and the Russian consulate in Seattle was ordered to close in response to Skripal poisoning the United Kingdom. More sanctions. Geez, yeah. 7 Russian oligarchs were sanctioned, and the companies they own control. 17 senior Russian government officials. More sanctions in June in response to malicious cyber-related activities. July 13th, indictments. July 16th, there was a Trump and Putin summit in Helsinki. Sorry. So this is this is kind of why it's good that Mike Pompeo isn't there. July 25th, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced a formal policy reaffirming the U.S. rejection of Russia's annexation of Crimea. The announcement was released an hour before his scheduled testimony to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Zelensky said that he wanted to retake Crimea, which once again has been Russian territory now for the last 6 years. I don't think you're going to have any luck with that. More sanctions, testimony, sanctions, statement, executive order imposing sanctions for election interference, sanctions in response to malicious activities, indictments, statements. Okay, withdrawing from the INF Treaty, and this was a pretty big deal. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. would withdraw from the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 60 days if Russia did not return to compliance. So once again, they did eventually leave the INF treaties with Russia, which once again continued to raise tensions with them. A statement increasing security assistance to Ukraine's Navy. The U.S. Department of State announced it would provide an additional $10 million in foreign military financing to further build Ukraine's naval capabilities in response to Russian attacks near the Kerch Strait. February 1st, the U.S. administration announced it would suspend its obligations under the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty because Russia was not complying with it. And we're into 2019 now. Continuation of the national emergency with respect to Ukraine. President Trump announced a continuation for 1 year of the national emergency declared with respect to Ukraine, more sanctions. And this is because they believe that Russia and Venezuela were working together. And, obviously about a year later, once again, go back to the show with Anya Palmpill, where we talked about the coup in Venezuela, sanctions, statement, democracy. Yeah, lots of statements, another meeting with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov. Sanctions because of the human rights abuse. The Chechen group and 5 Russian individuals were sanctioned under the Magnitsky Act over allegations of human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings and the torture of LGBT people. This is more just ridiculous stuff. Like, who cares? They're good. Other countries do horrible things. We do horrible things. And I'll finish it off right here. In response to a $100 million bank hacking scheme, a Russian-based cyber criminal organization called Evil Corp, this just sounds so ridiculous, was sanctioned for using the malware to steal more than $100 million from banks and financial institutions. So as you can see here, Trump did quite a bit in just 2 years against Russia, which surely exacerbated tensions between Russia and the US. So, a total number of policy actions are 52. All the links are here. I will put this in the description below. But I am of the belief that in order to find a reliable predictor of future behavior, you can look at relevant past behavior. So as we could see under Trump's first administration, he did quite a bit to inflame tensions, and he did have communications with Putin, which, much to his credit, that is better than Biden. And I do think that he probably will treat the Ukrainian situation a little bit better, at least from the anti-interventionist perspective, than Biden would. But really, the people around him and his actions as president, they kind of paint a different picture. So I threw a lot out here and I skipped over a whole ton in that whole article. Trump applied so many sanctions to Russia, and that really doesn't help, any kind of diplomacy, which is what we kind of want to see between these countries. We want to see, um, in my opinion, free trade. You want to see these countries get along and share goods. We should be importing energy from Russia and we should be exporting food, culture, vehicles, stuff like that over to there. And then same deal with China. Like, why can't we trade with all these countries? Why do we have to fight, all these wars and, try to be the global empire? It doesn't benefit the American people at all. I mean, we've given $300 billion to Israel, 200, soon to be $225 billion to Ukraine, a couple $1 billion to Taiwan, and then all these other countries received hundreds of millions of dollars as well. So, like the great Dr. Paul said, it's time. We just got to bring them all home. So, in closing, do I think Trump is going to end the war in Ukraine? Unfortunately, no. And I tried my best to lay out all my reasons why I think that here. Hopefully, this show was informative. I tried to pack in as much information as possible and try to lay it out in a very, very understandable manner. But this is pretty deep stuff. But yeah, I agree 100%. Can we all just get along? Yeah, man. Like, my enemy is not the Russian or the Chinese or the Iranian people, man. I'm a lover. I ain't a fighter. There are some people that need to be dealt with, but like, we don't want to go to war writ large with these countries, because if you get into a nuclear situation, which is highly likely with countries like Russia, China, and North Korea, that ends civilization, man. And we just can't have that. Nobody wins in a nuclear fallout. We don't want to do that. The world's a beautiful, wonderful place, and there are beautiful, wonderful people all over the world. I sincerely believe that. I meet tons of people all the time through playing music, through doing the podcast, through Twitter, even all that stuff. It's just, life is good, man. Life is fucking awesome. Why would you want to throw that away for, some arms manufacturers to make a little bit of money? It ain't worth it. So I hope Trump will prove me wrong. I've stated that from the beginning. I do think if we got Kamala Harris, I think there would be next to no hope of that. I think at least under a Trump administration, there is some hope of that. Hopefully someone like the Tulsi Gabbard, the RFK will kind of get in his ear and be more influential than Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio, but we'll just have to see. And even like the PayPal Mafia guys, where like Elon Musk, David Sachs, Vivek Ramaswamy, the whole lot of those guys, they're really good on the Ukraine war, not so good on China, but they're very good on the Ukraine war. So hopefully, those kind of guys get in his ear and say, hey, man, we don't want to do this anymore. Let's just fucking find a way to make this all go away, or at least get the US out of it, because it's not benefiting the American people. If you could find a single American that says and can explain how, fighting a proxy war with Russia benefits the US, I am all ears, because to me, there is no benefit to even coming close to thinking about the risk of a nuclear war. There's no winner there. So, anyways, I think I'm going to call it there. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you go to commoncrown.com. We do have a couple shows coming up December 14th at the Vortex with Stage of Dreams, and I forget the other band, but we're playing there December 14th at the Akron area. Come check us out. It's going to be fun. I know I have some friends of the podcast that are coming to see us, which I'm very, very excited for. I've never met some of these people before, so always good to get out and meet some friends. We'll be playing February 9th with Cultist Black at the Raindrop Inn. We will be playing with George Lynch, Lynch Mob, February 26th. There are some other shows coming up that we have scheduled in February, May, June, but those are a little bit far away, and I'll remind you guys of that as we get closer. Friday morning, I will have friend of the show and very, very dear friend of mine, Jack Napier, back on. And we're probably just going to chill, shoot the shit. But I figured it'd been a little bit since he'd been on. So Black Friday, I thankfully have off of work. So 10 a.m. my time, 4 p.m. his time over there in the Netherlands. We'll be coming on and just kind of shooting the shit for a little bit. So I guess also in closing, everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. Eat the turkey, but eat more ham, because let's be honest, ham is better. Hopefully there's sweet potatoes everywhere, because I fucking love sweet potatoes. But yeah, enjoy your time with the people that you care about. And I will see you guys Friday. One more time, just have a good Thanksgiving and hit up some Black Friday deals. Go to tigerfitness.com through the link below to get a killer deal. I know they're going to have an awesome sale on Friday. I already have a cart full of stuff, full of protein powder, protein bars. They have Anabars there as well, which are absolutely phenomenal. So if you're looking for a really, really good protein bar, they have the outright bars and the Anabars, which are probably the two best tasting protein bars ever. So if you're looking for all that kind of stuff, go to Tiger Fitness through the link below, and make sure you do not purchase until Friday, because I guarantee they're going to have a whole ton of cool stuff to give away for free with a purchase, obviously. So that being said, hit all the links below for all that good stuff. Consider donating, becoming a member to the channel, and all that good stuff. And until next time, guys, thank you so much and have a great Thanksgiving.